We highly praise President Zuma for his efforts to find a peaceful, democratic, and African solution for the Libyan problem. We praise his statement in which he stressed that the Libyan crisis should be solved through the African initiative, the African roadmap. And we also praise his insistence that the Libyan crisis can only be solved peacefully. He, of course, saluted brother leader, Muammar Gaddafi, and he indicated that the Libyan government did indeed agree to the African roadmap, and that the rebels are the ones who rejected it, and the rebels are the ones who had conditions. And President Zuma insisted that people need to talk and negotiate, and for the foreign intervention to stop immediately. We understand very well that President Zuma and the African continent are being ignored by the West. Only in the last few days, we had two powerful statements from Africa. One from the Pan-African Parliament. This is an institution that represents 52 African parliaments who represent in their turn the African nations, the nations of Africa. And these people met, discussed the Libyan crisis, and they came out with very positive outlook, very progressive. They condemned the NATO aggression against our nation. They called for everyone involved, the Libyan government, the rebels, everyone, to actually sit and talk and negotiate. They emphasized the sovereignty of Libya as an independent African state. They called for fact-finding missions to exist, to be present in Libya and find the facts before accusing Libya and punishing Libya for crimes against humanity. They called for an immediate review of the Security Council resolutions that were based on media reports, something that is illegal and immoral. They declared that they stand firm with the Libyan nation against the NATO aggression, and this is their language, not mine. You'll find their declaration on the internet, on the Pan-African Parliament website. And they are sending now, they are following words with action. They are sending to us in the next 3 or 4 days a high-level parliamentary committee that is investigating the events in Libya, and for this committee to send its report back to the parliament so it could have an extraordinary session on the crisis in Libya. They are also, we understand, willing and planning to go to Benghazi to get the other part of the story. Now, this is a powerful African voice that has been ignored, just like the African roadmap was ignored when it was proposed as a solution more than 2 months ago. Another powerful statement comes from the governments of Africa. Now, this is the parliament. You have the government of Africa, the governments, who met in an extraordinary summit, as you know, on Libya, and also came out with a declaration with conclusions that insisted that the Libyan crisis is an African problem, that it should be solved peacefully, demanded an immediate stop of NATO aggression against Libya, demanded that fact-finding missions and observers should be allowed into the country, a ceasefire from all parties, praised the Libyan position in the crisis, the Libyan government position, which accepted the ceasefire, the African roadmap, the negotiation, had no preconditions whatsoever, and actually called for the African countries who are members of the Security Council to call for an extraordinary session of the Security Council to review the violations of the two resolutions, 1973 and 1970. So you have the Parliament of Africa and the governments of Africa, both standing up and stating very clearly that the Libyan crisis is an African crisis, because Libya is an African country. It should be solved peacefully, without foreign intervention. Fact-finding missions should be sent immediately into Libya. There are violations of the Security Council resolutions. They condemned, this is their wording, the killing of civilians by NATO and the destruction of the Libyan infrastructure, whether it's civilian or military infrastructure. But what does NATO do, and the West? They ignore it because, of course, they have no respect for Africa. They still think of Africa as not adult or grown up enough to discuss and solve its problems. Now, if a problem occurred in Belgium or Italy, it's the European Union who solves the problem, with, of course, respect to the sovereignty of the European country in question. If a problem occurred in Asia or Latin America, and then the unions of these continents. Now, Libya is an African country. A problem occurred. We agreed that the African Union should solve it, and we acted positively to the African Union initiatives. But the West, with its might, its military might, with its greed, with its lust for destruction and killing and dominance, they only want to go after one man, Muammar Gaddafi, and the positions he's been taking all these years, and the projects and the dreams he has for Africa. And they know very well, just as the rebels know, that in a peaceful solution proposed by the African Union, both the West and the rebels lose. And Libyan nation will rally behind its leader, surprise, surprise, and behind its unity. There is no other interpretation. The international media is either unprofessional or immoral, because it never tackles these questions with NATO or with the Western governments. I watch closely the press conferences of the presidents of the European governments and the officials, the NATO. Very rarely these people are questioned. Why is it that they do not give the African Union the chance to solve this problem peacefully? Very rarely, and in a very shy way, these people, these European and Western officials, American and European officials, are asked the hard questions about if Africa wants to solve the problem and is willing, and it had two extraordinary summits on the situation in Libya, the parliamentary one and the government's one, and they had a roadmap and they are willing to solve it, and they visited Libya and they talked to the Libyan government, and the Libyan government said, okay, why is it that we are not stopping bombardment for one day to allow something other than killing and destruction to happen? Very rarely the hard questions are asked to the other parties in this conflict. The rebels, I follow their press conferences, I watch them. Very rarely they are asked the hard questions. Very rarely they are asked, why is it that they do not respond positively to the African Union initiative and save their country from destruction, from foreign dominance, their brothers and sisters and the rest of the country from being murdered every day by the NATO attack? Africa has done its best, and it has shown it, not through the positions of 2 or 3 or 4 countries, but through the positions of the dozens of African countries collectively. So again, for this issue, we, the Libyan government, hold the whole world responsible morally and legally for what happens now and today, now and here in Libya. We have said again and again, you cannot keep bombarding us and saying we are bombarding you because you are not observing a ceasefire. How do you observe a ceasefire from one party? We said now and again, to have a ceasefire, you have to have all parties agreeing to the ceasefire. You have to have a fixed date, fixed hour, and more, you have to have observers on the ground who will make sure that the ceasefire is not violated, and when it is violated, what are the circumstances that led to this violation? We agreed to the observers from the UN, the European Union, the African Union. We agreed to fact-finding missions. We agreed to a fixed date of a ceasefire. But again, I say to the international media, no one is asking the hard questions. No one is asking the hard questions to the West, to the States, to the Europeans, to the rebels. I was honest with you before, and I'm going to be honest again. I said this off the record, but I'm going to say it on the record now. Many people, and this is, by the way, not an attack on you, journalists or on international media, it's an observation. We understand and we know that Western media especially have for a long time understood Muammar Gaddafi in a very negative light. Now, professional journalists should not let the preconceptions, the ideas they had from decades of indoctrination in their home country, to affect the job they do. But of course, we're humans, and we do indeed get influenced by the preconceptions we have. And that is why it's very unfortunate that some decent and professional journalists cannot or are not willing to actually even accept the idea that one, for example, we are ready for a peaceful democratic solution for Libya. Second, for example, that the Libyan nation in its majority does rally behind Muammar Gaddafi as a leader or a figurehead for the Libyan state. That we are genuine when we want to save this country from destruction, that we are not killing civilians, we are actually fighting against armed rebels who chose to destroy this country by making a prompt stop to all the reforms we were going through and turn the country into a bloodbath, into a hellfire. And the proof, I think we have it. The proof is very simple. We are agreeing to every single peaceful initiative that was proposed to us that does not have conditions. Let the Libyan people choose what they want. I have said this enough time to bore most of you. But the thing is, the truth is the truth. The fact is the fact. Doesn't matter how many times you repeat it. Sometimes when I repeat these facts, I look into the eyes of the journalist I'm talking to, and I wonder how many times has he or she heard me say this before. And I do believe it's also my moral, my personal moral position, because I want in the future, in 10 years or 20 years, to remember that I did ask the hard questions. I did answer the hard questions, and I did state the important things. Everyone is saying no to peace except us. And this should tell you something, guys. We are so sure about our position as a government in this nation. We are so sure about the political desires of this nation that we are prepared now and here to have a full inclusive political process